Welcome to the Good Enough Garage. On today's episode, we're going to be working on getting my 88 S10 Old Sport ready for winter. Winter's coming. It's actually already here. It's been pretty cold, rainy, snowing. The 88, if you didn't know, is my daily driver. I mean, some of you might call me crazy for driving a 30-some-year-old vehicle every day, but I drive it all year round. I try not to drive it in really, really bad snow or when they're salting or whatever, but if it's dry, rainy, or just a little bit damp out, I will drive it in the winter. So we got to get this thing ready. Come on in and I'll show you everything we're going to be doing to this thing. I'm WhiteWall Steve. This is my Good Enough Garage. So here is all the stuff getting done today. We got new gauges. I have a set of gauges in the truck already, but the temperature gauge has been reading pretty low. I put a new thermostat in it because I thought maybe the thermostat was stuck open. Did not change the gauge at all. It reads like between 150 and 180 when it used to run 200. It's got a 195 thermostat in it, so it should be running around that. And it doesn't even get anywhere close to that, so I'm pretty sure the gauges are trash. And there's some pretty junk gauges too. They're like the cheapy ones you get at the auto parts store. So I bought some better Bosch ones. They'll match my tack with the white face and the orange needle, and they'll look really nice. So we'll get those put in. Also, I got another radio to put in. The other radio doesn't illuminate correctly, has a lot of problems with it, and the tape deck doesn't work really good, and it kind of crackles when you turn it up, so I got me a better radio for that. And it also looks a little better with the chrome knobbies and whatnot. Got a new blower motor for the heater. The old blower motor is working okay right now, but it's squeaking a little bit when you turn it on, and rather than to have to change it when it finally goes bad in the dead of winter, because I know it will, we'll get the new one put in too. Gonna get an oil change done. I got 3 quarts of 10W40 Valvoline high mileage. This is my preference for using when I do my oil changes on this thing. You can use whatever preference oil that you want to use. I use the 1040 because it is an older motor. And then I also run this Lucas high mileage oil stabilizer because I really like that. Kind of helps the oil pressures and kind of helps keep those parts lubricated on that high mileage engine. And then I use a AC Delco filter because I like to keep it with the original equipment stuff, but I'm sure there's better options, but this is good enough for the 88. And then I use some what Vice Grip Garage would call the Italian tune-up. We're going to put a little bit of this in the gas, kind of help that injector a little bit. And then I also got an air filtre to put in there because the old one looked pretty bad. So this is what we're going to be working on the 88 today. So let's start by getting these gauges done. These gauges are pretty straightforward, mechanical gauges. They got the part there for the water temp, and then they got the oil pressure, and everything's already ran from those old gauges, so it's pretty much just get the old stuff out, put the new stuff in. I do have to hook up the volt gauge though, because I never hooked it up on the old ones, and I kind of want it to work, so we'll get that done as well. So let's hop to it and get this stuff installed. Okay, not sure how good you guys can see, but I got my gauges down here. I got a bunch of stuff on this little ledge here. Kind of get all this stuff out of here, but my gauges sit right here, and they're bolted to the bracket for the ashtray. So this bracket will come out, and those gauges are bolted to that. So we'll just do the new gauges the same way. But what we need to do first is get these gauges unbolted. There's a little nut on the back for the oil pressure, so we'll get that unbolted. And what's actually nice is those other gauges are a little smaller, so they'll be kind of tucked up in there a little bit better, I think. And then we got to go into the engine bay and unhook the water temp gauge, and hopefully we don't make too bad of a mess. I'd like to get the new one hooked in immediately after pulling out the other one, but we'll see what we can do. So let's start by getting all this tore out first and see where we're at. And I think while we're in here, we're going to get this radio changed out too. I got the old gauges out. I just went ahead and cut this line for the water temp gauge because this gauge was junk anyway. For the lighting, I actually spliced them into a little plug, so that way when I do the new one, all I got to do is just do the same thing and it'll plug right in. And then one thing that happened was the line broke for the oil pressure. So I got this copper line. They actually make a couple of different lines. They make this copper line and then they make a nylon plastic line. I like the copper line, but as you can see, it got brittle and broke on me. So I'm going to cut it about as close as I can to this to get me a nice new line. And then the new gauges come with new ferrules and new nuts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide my nut on, slide my ferrule on, and then that way I can hook it right up to the new gauges. So I'm going to get this cut right now. One other thing, guys, is you always want to make sure you put the nut on first, then the ferrule. But I got that all set. So now we got to get this. We're going to take this over to the bench. We're going to get this pulled off of here and get the new gauge set up, bolted onto this piece. So let's get that done. I got the new gauge set up right here, and then I got the old one here. Now the new one is a lot smaller than the old one, so we're going to have to drill all new holes. I really wasn't wanting to do that, but that's what we have to do. So let's get at it. As you can see, I got it all wired into this spade connector, the shielded spade connector. So that'll go right into where I got it on there. And then I also wired the black end, since these aren't self-grounding like the other ones, I just grounded it right to it. So that should work. This is going to be my oil pressure, and then here's my water temp. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to get me some eyelets, put them on these two terminals. This is the positive, this is the negative. This will go to ground on the car somewhere. And then this one will go to a positive, so a switched hot somewhere, and that'll give us our volt gauge. So I'll run some coils of wires, and then we can just run that wherever needs be once we get it installed in the car. So I'm going to get that done real quick, and then we can go ahead and start slapping this bad boy in. Alright guys, so we got this all set, mounted. I got my wires for the gauge here. Just kind of hanging. We're going to cut these down, of course, once we figure out where they're going. But this just gives me some room to play with. And then, of course, I got this. Oh, yeah, one other thing I got to do. This terminal didn't fit with the old one, so I pulled it off of there. So let me just put a new terminal on that real quick. Grab this wire here. Just kind of put it into there like that. Give her the old crimp. There you go. Okay. So now first thing I want to do is get this routed properly. Now there was a boot up underneath where I ran the old one. I'm just going to run it through there. So I got to get this in there, run it through, back in the dash so it looks nice, and then get it tucked back in there. So I'm going to do that real quick. Okay, so I got that pretty much routed. We can just kind of pull it through there. So what we want to do now kind of run this in to where we want it, and then we got to hook up the oil pressure. Making sure not to mess up the ferrule or the nut, and then getting that tight. So we'll just kind of fish this through here, and then we'll clean this up once we're done. Okay, so I was able to get that done. Took a little bit of doing, but I managed to get that all set. So now we can get this all bolted in, and then we got to run these 2 wires for our volt gauge, and then we'll be all set. So let's get this kind of set in there. All right. Now they're installed. I still got to put all this back together, and we're going to put the new radio in while we're doing it. All right, so I got my handy dandy test light. Oh, by the way, I did start the truck, make sure that oil pressure gauge isn't leaking. No oil down there, so that's a good plus. I will say, if you guys want to do gauges on your vehicle, I recommend going with an electronic gauge so you don't have to run that line, but I'm an idiot, so this is what we do. So now we just got to find a little bitty ground, and somewhere around here. Let's go with this and see if that gives me a ground. I should have power here. Okay, nothing there. Hang on. Let me find my decent ground here. I could probably just ground it to that. There we go. There should be a full-time hot in here somewhere. I think one of these, I think this one is full-time hot. Yeah, so there should be a switched hot. I think this yellow wire is going to be the switched hot. So let's find out. Yep, there it is. So there's my light on, light off, light on, light off. Okay. That's very annoying. There's some weird wiring issues going on here that I really should fix. They're all from the previous owner, but I'm not gonna. I'm gonna go ahead and tap into this yellow wire here and use that for my signal for this gauge, and then we'll just ground it anywhere. I mean, honestly, you can ground it anywhere there's metal. We can probably ground it. So let's go ahead and get that done. Volt gauge is all hooked up. Now all we got to do is finish routing the water temp sensor and go into the engine bay and get that put in. So let's head over there. Okay guys, so not sure if you can see it, but right here is where I had the old temp sensor going to. I had it kind of curled up and zip tied right here. Right as I pull this one out, put the other one in. We're going to leak a little bit of coolant, but it shouldn't be anything too serious. So let's get that done. And just like the other one, it is a little long. You know, we'll do this kind of the same thing. We'll just kind of curl it up and pull it out of the way. Because they make these kind of in a universal way so that you can, you know, use them in any type of vehicle. And we'll just kind of cut that. Just get that up and out of the way. And we'll do kind of the same thing with the new one. So we'll kind of and that should be good. So let's get this one pulled out and immediately put the other one back in. Alright, so let's get this one out of here. We're already leaking coolant, which is not good. I mean, I didn't want to have that leaking, but get the new one put in there. And hopefully we didn't leak too much coolant. But if we need to, we can top it off. And that is in. We'll have to take it for a ride once we're all done with everything else. Make sure it's all good. But the gauges are in, gauges are done. So let's move on to the next thing. Let's get that new radio put in. Alright, so this is pretty simple considering we have the dash already tore apart for the gauges. But all we want to do is just kind of get this thing in there and make sure we don't mount it upside down. Make sure everything's plugged in right. Make sure our antenna's plugged in and just make sure it's all right. So let's get that plugged in first. Okay. And we're all set. I'll just kind of tuck the wires back and we can bolt it in. Oops, see? Okay, just like that, radio's mounted. Let's make sure it works. And it works. So now we'll just get this all buttoned up and then we're going to move on to the blower motor. Okay, so on these old S10s, the blower motor's right here, right out in the open, easy to get to. We got to take this little hose here off. That just kind of pulls out of there and it's got a little bunged end, so it'll go in the new one. We get it unplugged. So it should be pretty straightforward. So let's get that unbolted and then we'll get the new one in there. Okay, so here's the old one. It's got this little cage thing on it, and you can hear it. It's got a little bit, when it first kicks in, it's got a little bit of a squeak to it, so it's on its way out. So let's go open up that new one and bring it over here and see if it works. Okay, so here's the new one, and here's the old one. And if you can't tell already, the new one, the cage is too long. This happens sometimes when you get these aftermarket parts, you know, they're just not the same. This is probably for a car with air conditioning that's got a bigger box. But one thing we can do, everything else looks pretty much the same, so one thing we can do to make this real easy is we're just going to take the cage off of this one, put it on this one. Real piece of cake. Okay, so one thing I'm noticing is there's a pretty big gap here. So let's see if this thing actually works. If not, we'll have to go and maybe look into getting a different style. Yeah, let's see if it works. No, it's hitting. Okay, so that's going to be a problem. I'm going to have to go back to the store and see what's going on with this and why it's not the same. So that really kills this idea. So, big problem. The auto parts store did not have another one. They only had that one. So I'm going to have to order it online. So this is going to have to be a job that we kind of save for another time. But that gives you an idea how to change one of these. It's pretty simple. It's kind of a bummer, but that's what happens when you drive a 30-year-old vehicle. They don't stock parts for these things. So I'm going to get this thing thrown back together, and then we're going to jump on that oil change and change out that air filter. So, ugh. Alright, let's get this air filter changed. Forgive me for this engine compartment looking like crap. This is how it is. It's a daily driver. But I do have a new 2.5 liter on an engine stand with 20,000 original miles on it. I think we're going to clean that engine up and eventually put it in here and make it look really pretty. But for now, I'm lazy. I don't like cleaning anything. And that thing's pretty trash. So let's put in a nice fancy new one. go. All right, and just like that, done. So now we want to go over and get the oil change started. Now I can get to the filter right here, so I'm just going to go ahead and get that kind of loose. Let's get this thing jacked up and get the oil drained out of it. She's all drained, got the new oil filter on, so let's go ahead and drop her down and put the oil in it. What I like to do is I'm going to put 1 quart of this in, then I'll put the Lucas in, then I'll put the other 2 quarts in. Once again, not going to use a funnel. Why? I don't know. I like to make messes. Drink up, little fella. Totally missed. Okay, now comes the hard stuff. This stuff is like honey. One way to get it going and get it done a little faster is to stab it with a screwdriver. Hiya! That kind of gets her going a little better there. Hiya! Totally missed. Okay, we'll get these last 2 quarts in there. Then we'll fire this thing up and make sure our levels are good. Hiya! Totally missed. Hiya! Actually made it in that time. So let's fire this thing up, see what it's looking like. And we were right there at the top, looking great. Let's get the cap back on that. And boom, she's looking good. We got pretty much everything done. Weren't able to get that blower motor done, but it's kind of what happens, you know, when you're dealing with these auto parts stores. Things don't quite match up. But we'll get that on order, and I'll get that done on my own time off camera. I pretty much showed you guys how to do it. I'm going to go take this thing for a ride, make sure the temp gauge works good, make sure it's not overheating or anything like that. Maybe I'll pick up a little coolant and add a little bit to it. But for right now, I think Old Sport is good enough. So thanks for tuning in to the WhiteWall Steve Good Enough Garage. I'll see you next time. Oh yeah, be sure to like and subscribe too. And leave a comment too if you want. See ya.